I want to mention something special about the virtual paths that I selected for my bundles. They are called virtual paths because those paths don't actually exist. They don't have to exist. Paths like /bundles/CSS and /bundles/JS. I'm using those URLs that do not exist just so you can see them work. The MVC runtime and the bundling components will be able to intercept a request for those virtual paths and respond with the bundled resources. So everything in my example is going to work, but I could run into problems if I was using some specific styles inside of Bootstrap. Because inside of bootstrap.css, in addition to layout, there are also styles that you can use that will give you little icons for alerts and icons to place on buttons. Those icons are stored in an images directory that is underneath the style sheet. And if you look in Bootstrap, you'll see that the style sheet references those files using a relative URL, relative to the style sheet. And that works perfectly because when a browser sees a relative URL in a style sheet, like images/something.png, it will request that particular resource relative to where it retrieved the style sheet. In my case, I am using the name bundles to make a point that what we are specifying is a virtual path that doesn't exist at all. But it could get me into trouble if I want to use some of these features that reference an asset using a relative URL. Because when I create a bundle with a virtual path of /bundles/CSS, then when I want to send that bundle to the client, I reference it using its virtual path. So literally it's like having a link for a style sheet with an href of /bundles/CSS. And the problem there is that when the browser sees that it needs to include images/something.png from this particular style sheet, well, it thinks that that style sheet came from a file named CSS in the directory bundles. So it'll make a request for /bundles/images/something.png. And that file does not exist. That particular request is not going to be intercepted, and the server is simply going to return a 404, and you're not going to have your images or icons appear. If we want bundled assets and imports and other features like that in CSS to work, we need to make the virtual paths appear as if they're coming from the same directory as where the style sheet actually exists. So a working bundle config for this particular scenario, where we're going to use some of these styles that have background images specified, in that scenario I could use a virtual path of /content/CSS, because now the browser thinks the style sheet came from a file called CSS that is in the content directory, and when it needs to get one of those images, it will make a request to /content/images/something.png, and that's where that file actually exists, and the server will be able to return it, and all of the icons work. I'm going to continue using bundles as the virtual path name just to make a point, and you'll see it work in this case, but be aware that you'll want to use the real path to the style sheet at least with anything at the end, so /content/CSS or /content/styles or /content/elephant, any of those would work. When you start a new MVC4 project template using the internet template, the style sheet bundle will be called /content/CSS. That means any relative URLs or imports in the style sheet will always work, and you might want to do the same thing with JavaScript files too. There are some libraries out there that will asynchronously load additional pieces of the library using a relative path from where the script was loaded. So instead of using /bundles/JS, you might want to use /scripts/JS. To retrieve a bundle, I told you that you could go to the virtual path that you use to register a bundle, and then the runtime will respond with your bundled files, which means we could write a script or link tag by hand to inject the bundles into our page. For instance, I could say script source equals /bundles/JS and get all of my JavaScript. But there's actually a better way to do this. The system.web.optimization namespace includes styles and scripts helpers that you can use to emit the proper tags for your bundles. These helpers make things very simple, and when I want to inject my CSS bundles, I can just say styles.render and pass in my virtual path. You can actually pass in multiple paths there. The runtime will take care of the rest and emit all the proper link and script tags. If I want a little more control over my tag, I can use the resolve bundle URL method to create the proper URL for me. And you might be wondering, if slash bundles slash CSS is the proper URL to reach a bundle, why do I need to generate the URL? And the answer to that question is that the optimization framework can put more information in the URL than is necessary to reach the bundle. This additional information is a magic query string value that will help avoid caching stale content if you ever change the contents of your bundle or change one of the files in the bundle. That query string value will change, and that will force the browser to fetch the latest version. We'll see that magic value when we start using these bundles. Our bundles are configured, we're ready to render, but first let's do a test. I'm going to take this URL, bundles/js, and just paste it into the browser to make sure everything is working, because this request, the /bundles/js, should retrieve my bundled JavaScript, and it looks like it does. This is looking like jQuery at the top, and if I go all the way to the bottom, this looks like it could be Bootstrap. So I really think things are going to work for us. Let's put these bundles to work in our layout view. So we created one bundle that could package together both of these CSS files, and now I can render it with the styles helper, except the styles helper has to be in scope, and currently it is not because we created this from an empty project. So let me go into the web.config. Essentially what we need to do is take this namespace, system.web.optimization, and have it be in effect for Razor views if we want the nice syntax without specifying the full namespace. And the way to do that is to open the web.config that is in the views folder. This contains the Razor configuration section. This area right here is what controls the namespaces that are in effect when Razor is parsing and compiling the code inside of it. So I'm just going to say namespace equals system.web.optimization, and that should put that namespace in effect for us. The other way to do that would have been to add a using statement in the CS.html file itself, but I don't think that's really necessary. So let's say styles.render, and I want to render bundles, CSS. I also have a bundle for modernizer, so let's render scripts for bundles/modernizer. And I have a bundle for all of these JavaScript files down here, so I can say scripts.render bundles.js. And let me just do a quick build. And it looks like Visual Studio is still unhappy with these, but hopefully the IntelliSense will catch up, because I'm pretty sure we have everything in place where if I refresh this page, it should continue to work and we'll get all the right scripts and styles. And it looks like it did. Let's actually view the source to this. So in the source, notice that I have two link tags, one for bootstrap.css and one for styles.css. And you might be saying, but Scott, I thought the whole purpose of bundling and minification was to combine all those files together. And that's true. However, the bundling and minification infrastructure will do different things when you say styles.render or scripts.render, depending on the debug versus release setting for your application. So if I look inside of the web.config right now, compilation debug is set to true. And when debug is true, it's always going to emit separate link tags and separate script tags for everything you've bundled. That just makes things easier to debug because you actually have those separate scripts that you can look up with the developer tools in the browser and set breakpoints like you normally would. If I change compilation debug to false and save everything, let's come back and refresh the browser again. And let me view the source again. And now you can see everything has been bundled. We have a single link tag pointing to bundles/CSS. Here's the magic value that will help us bust the cache if we ever change something in that bundle. This value will change. This is the bundle for the single modernizer.js file, and this is the bundle that contains jQuery and everything else here at the bottom of the page. So we've gone from 2 link tags and about 7 individual script tags to 1 link tag and 2 script tags. Now there's another way to force the system.web.optimization stuff to emit things like this, and that is even if your web.config, even if the debug is true inside of here, if in the bundle.config you say bundle table dot enable optimizations equals true, that will always override the web.config setting, and it will emit single script tags, single link tags. Everything will be bundled together. The other thing I want to point out about this is that in addition to bundling, the optimization framework has also done some minification. So let's take this URL and paste it into the browser and bring up that source. And the source that appears here is going to be a little bit different than the source that appears in the actual script file. The source in the script file has lots of comments, lots of white space, lots of large local variable names. The source here in the browser has been transformed through a minification process that tries to reduce the size of that download as much as possible. And it does that by stripping out comments, by stripping out unnecessary white space, by shortening local variable names so that the local variable names are as short as possible, and that has a tremendous impact on the total size of the download, believe it or not. Now let's return to timing the request to see if we made any noticeable impact on the page load speed. I'll go into Fiddler, tell it to start simulating modem speeds again, press F12 to open the developer tools in Internet Explorer, go to the Network tab, click on Start Capturing, and let's refresh this URL. So the first thing you'll notice is now instead of 10 different downloads, we only have 4 downloads. Internet Explorer is able to do all of these concurrently, and we're not going to have to wait too long, hopefully, for this final result to come in. And now the results are in. You can see that we finished the page load in 20 seconds. That's compared to almost 60 seconds before. We delivered a total of 433 kilobytes. That's compared to 897 kilobytes before. So bundling and minification roughly cut the number of bytes that we sent to the client in half, and it cut the time it took to load all of the assets for this page by more than half. And the net result is that with very little work, we were able to do a dramatic optimization for this page. Finally, as one last demonstration of what you can do with the system.web.optimization namespace, I'm going to write some CoffeeScript. If you haven't heard of CoffeeScript, we have a video on pluralsight.com that covers CoffeeScript. It's a little language that compiles into JavaScript and tries to avoid all of the pitfalls of JavaScript. Here's what a little CoffeeScript file looks like. This is just defining an animal class. Every animal has a constructor where you can pass in a name. Every animal can speak. When you tell an animal to speak, that will raise an alert. That's your typical JavaScript alert. So we will create a new animal and tell the animal to speak. How can I get this to execute inside of my application? The first thing I would do is install a package called Coffee Bundler. And once that is installed, I will have a new transformation available that I can plug in to the system.web.optimization transformations for a particular bundle, and it can actually convert CoffeeScript into JavaScript. It sends the JavaScript down to the browser and everything executes. So now that that package is installed, I can come into my bundle config, and inside of my bundle config, I can add a new bundle. This is going to be a script bundle. The virtual path is /bundles/animals. It's going to include animals.coffee, that coffee script we were just looking at. And I'm not using the typical technique of inserting the script bundle into the bundle collection because I need to add a transform. I want to make sure this is the first transformation that runs. That's why I'm doing an insert here. But if you look in this transforms collection, what you'll find for a script bundle is the JS minify transformation. JS minify, of course, being the transformation that'll take a JavaScript file and minify it. This transform is the coffee bundler. It's going to compile this coffee file into JavaScript. Then it'll go to the next stage in the transformation pipeline, which will be JS minify. And that will put together our bundle. So to use this bundle, I can go to the layout page and just include this everywhere, or I can include this on a specific page. But let me put this at the bottom of the page. And the way I'm going to render this right now is by using the resolve bundle URL. Because at this moment in time, the coffee bundler and scripts.render don't play well together. But that's part of the danger of working with pre-release software. The other thing I need to do at this point in time is delete this app start file that the coffee bundler package added to my application, because it is not caught quite up with the latest release of system.web.optimization, so it would create compiler errors. Let me delete that. And now let's do a build. And let's run the application. And up pops our message. Dash the cat is speaking. Excellent. If I actually go to /bundles/animals, I can see the CoffeeScript that was transformed into JavaScript. And now I could compare these two files to see how CoffeeScript compiles into JavaScript. So that's something else that you can do with the bundling and minification in ASP.NET MVC4. You can work with CoffeeScript. You can also work with less and Sass, which are alternates for cascading style sheets. You can find bundlers and transformers for those technologies in the NuGet package system.